Hey everybody, this lecture is going to be an introduction to Franz Kafka and The Metamorphosis. And so just so you know, the PowerPoint I'm going to be referencing is located in week 13. Um, so Franz Kafka was born in 1883 in Prague, or the Czech Republic. He is of Ashkenazi Jewish descent, which, as you know, in this period of time, this is pre-Holocaust Europe, and so there is the rise of fascism happening though during this time, and Kafka was very much aware of the anti-Jewish sentiment that was going around during that time. He did eventually die of tuberculosis in 1924, and all of his work was published posthumously. So while he was living, he had no idea the impact that his work was going to have, and he was very much unrecognized, underappreciated, unknown, very much like Shakespeare and Emily Dickinson. And it's funny because his work is really known as like the kind of tome of existentialist thought post, the Industrial Revolution and in the age of modernity, post the age of disillusionment. And so his work is very important, although he had no idea how significant it was going to be. He always kind of felt like he wasn't, worth enough. He wrote a lot about his feelings about himself, like this hatred he felt about himself throughout all of his works. You can definitely see it in A Hunger Artist. His father is another subject that he writes about a lot. His father was very overbearing, very authoritarian-like person. And so he really, you'll see his father in The Metamorphosis for sure, depicted through the father within that story as well. Kafka worked in insurance law. That was his main job. So he literally wore a suit to work and worked very hard to produce rights for laborers. So trying to get them medical care when they got injured. A lot of the rights that workers have today didn't exist then. There was child labor. There was all kinds of horrible things going on. You can read about this in The Jungle if you're interested. But yeah, workers' rights didn't really exist. And so he worked hard for that during his own time. And so you'll see a lot of that reflected in his writing. He's on the side of the workforce, he's on the side of the laborer, and he's very critical of managers and people who, especially the bourgeoisie, which I'll talk about in a moment. Also, side note, most of his family was murdered in the Holocaust. Again, they are Ashkenazi Jewish descent, so he didn't experience it himself, obviously, because he died of tuberculosis, but just keep in mind, this is a huge part of his life also. I can't show this to you. They won't let me. But you can look it up. Definitely watch this little TED Talk video. It's pretty short, but it basically talks about what it is to be Kafkaesque. What is it, right? This is a term that exists in literature. And it's really about, again, this existentialism, right? Internal and external conflict and navigating systems of power that are absurd. And the fact that we put ourselves into these situations, right? One of the big things that is in The Metamorphosis is discussion about, is Gregor, who's the one that is turned into the cockroach, is he a victim or does he victimize himself? This is a question that comes up a lot as you're going to read it, and you're definitely going to want to think about that. And all of the characters, everybody in the story, is really a metaphor for something bigger. You can really look at the father figure as, authoritarian role, someone who's a boss or someone who's of the bourgeoisie. And so he's really exploring these kind of thoughts in his work. And, it's full of humor. I love to, when I read Kafka, look at it in a sarcastic tone, an ironic tone, and he means this. So when you're reading part one, hopefully you'll find it a little bit amusing. And really what he's doing is highlighting the absurd of life, right? Why do we put ourselves through these situations, right? So definitely keep a lookout for that. The Metamorphosis was published in 1915, obviously during the fascist uprising. There was a lot of unrest in Europe leading up to the war. And again, this is a novella, so it's not a short story, and it's definitely not a novel. It's in between. So this is another genre of literature that we are reading. The main character is Gregor Samsa, becomes a cockroach. He's a traveling salesman who becomes a monstrous vermin. And so, again, this is kind of, it's ironic, it's funny, it's absurd, and Kafka means it to be this way. So I'm going to go back. Do make sure that you guys check out all the notes that I've posted on the different parts of The Metamorphosis. There are 3 parts of the story. I'm going to be posting separate lectures for each part. So again, this is written during a post-disillusionment era, right? This existential thought is still in the story, this loss of humanity, loss of faith, loss of safety, loss of control. Questions come up of who am I? What is my purpose? Is there any meaning? These are things that he's exploring in the story. But also, again, a side note is the rise of fascism, the hatred of the Jews is also something you're going to see in the story. And also a critique of the industrial space. So we've got the rise of the Industrial Revolution, rise of capitalism, rise of the labor force, rise of the middle class. And I like to talk about the middle class as the bourgeoisie. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before, but like people like to say, oh, you're so bougie. What this really is a reference to is the middle class that was new. So you've got, the aristocracy and the elite, and then you've got the labor force and the workers. And then in between, you've got these people that are of the middle class. They're not exactly the elite, and they definitely are not the workers. You want to think of them as like managers or directors, right? They're the ones that own the shops, right? But they're not super, super wealthy, but they have some power. And so the bourgeoisie is like a new thing that was happening at this time. And so, there's new wealth coming up, especially because of capitalism and the rise of industrialization. And so Kafka was very critical of these people, these social climbers who were taking advantage of the labor force. And he explores the hierarchy of power within his story. And you see it not just in the workplace, but you see it in the home space as well. So definitely look out for those elements as you are reading the novella. Okay, thanks guys.